Hello, my name is David Kim from Connecticut College, and you are watching the dialogue series Love Driven Politics here on Meaning of Life TV. We're breaking form today, and we're engaged in a public dialogue with my friend and collaborator, John Jackson from the University of Pennsylvania. John is a filmmaker, an anthropologist, and also the Dean of the School of Policy and Practice at Penn. Today, he and I engaged in a public dialogue called Speaking Truth to Power with Love. As you know, this dialogue series, Love Driven Politics, is a forum where activists, scholars, artists, and other concerned citizens all contribute to a conversation about generating a more amenable and engaging public life of love. If you do not know who I am, my name is David Kim. I'm faculty here in Religious Studies and American Studies. For purposes of this afternoon, I'm here to host and participate in a public dialogue with my dear friend and collaborator, John L. Jackson. John is a Richard Perry University professor at the University of Pennsylvania. He's a renowned anthropologist and filmmaker. And really, is that Robin?
Yes.
Hi, Robin.
Hi.
How are you? The great Robin McCauley, theater artist extraordinaire. Robin, will you stand up and say hello? Wow. Okay. Anyway, so John, anthropologist, filmmaker. He's also dean of the School of Policy and Practice at the University of Pennsylvania, which is their social work and social justice school. Author of more books than I can remember: Racial Paranoia, Harlem World, Real Black, Impolite Conversations. Oh, Thin Description. Harry Potter. He wrote Harry Potter. He's an extraordinary guy. And so, look, today we wanted to have a conversation about some of these key values and aspirations at the college around diversity, justice, and what it is that we think we mean by the global liberal arts. We've decided to frame the dialogue around the theme of speaking truth to power with love. And we'll say a bit more about why we chose to do that in a minute. So what I'm going to do is have John speak for a little bit. I'll speak for a little bit, and we'll do a little back and forth, and we'll open up the conversation. Okay? Great. John, very cool. Thank you.
We do want it to be a dialogue, so hopefully we'll be able to pull that off. I think I'm just going to maybe say 2 or 3 very quick things. How much time do I have in this opening?
You can have 6 or 8 minutes.
6 or 8 minutes. So the first thing I'll tell you is I've been spending a lot of time as dean. This is my 2nd year as dean of the School of Social Policy and Practice. And one of the first things I did was go around the city of Philadelphia, a fantastic city, by the way, to meet with some of the places, the field placement sites where our students do a lot of their field-based research and service. And so there was this one moment, not too long after I had started, when I met with a high school principal in one of the poor, quote-unquote, underserved parts of North Philadelphia, who had brought me in because we have a lot of students at the high school, and he wanted to get a chance to meet the new dean, allow me to tour the school, and he wanted to sit me down and tell me about his approach, his philosophy as a principal. And I remember being so struck. Even now when I think about it, I get goosebumps a little bit. I was so taken by the way he tried to describe and frame his own investment in those high school students. And the way he framed it basically was telling me, he said, let me tell you something, Dean. I'm working with young students who, if I can't convince them, before I teach them math, before I teach them how to read and write, before I tell them anything about the social world and try to get them to understand science, if I can't prove to them that I love them, I don't have a chance. He said, not only that, I'm not going to hire anyone in this school building to mop the floors, to give them food in the cafeteria, to try to teach them anything from a book unless those people can show to me that they love these kids holistically, as human beings. He said, they can't do that in the context where there's so many indications they get that they're not loved. He said, if I can't do that, I can't do my job, and nothing else will work for me. And already I could tell he was committed. He believed it. He had internalized. So already I was like, wow, you don't hear principals often talking about their jobs in that way. I thought that was such a powerful and moving way to talk about his own investment. But that isn't even what really had me going crazy, because after that session was done, he had set up, a group of high school students from the school to take me around their hallways. And it was so clear that they actually bought it, that they believed the principal and the teachers and their staff loved them, really loved them. I don't know if you all have been to a local high school recently. Some of you might just got out of high school. But the semester before, I had taken a group of University of Pennsylvania, maybe it was the year before, University of Pennsylvania undergrads to a different high school in West Philadelphia. We're going to do some film projects together. We ended up doing, I think, really fascinating and provocative video on public education in the contemporary moment in Philadelphia. And I remember after our first session in their classroom, in the high school, we almost had to come back and have an intervention just between and among us, because they were so shaken by how clearly the students demonstrated to them. We didn't have the language for it then, we talked about it other terms, but the sense that they understood they weren't loved. Because they didn't feel loved. They didn't feel like even us being there meant we were going to sincerely be there for the whole semester, invest in them. And so there's a way in which I never forget that, and it always makes me think of actually my colleague, David Kim, who often likes to bring up Du Bois. And Du Bois has this sort of frame consideration of things from over 100 years ago. How does it feel to be a problem? The frame is about trying to make sense of sort of race relations in the contemporary, in what his version of contemporary American society is saying, this is going to be something we grapple with for a long time. And often when social scientists look at that, they tend to spend most of their time on the latter half, right? The problem, how do we operationalize, what are the matrices we use, anthropologists, sociologists, economists. We're trying to make sense of what is the problem, how do we fix it, how do we find it, how do we locate it. But I think what David often focuses on is the first half of that. The idea that there's something about how we negotiate difference that's about affect, that's about how you feel. And one of the things it means is often we can't intellectualize ourselves out of the most pressing issues of the day. It's not just that you have the better built argument means you're going to win the case. Because so much of our investment in this stuff is about what we feel in our gut. It's about stuff that people actually can't dissuade us of, no matter how many mountains, how much mountainous energy and evidence they have to bring to bear on our position. And so, for me, part of what I would want us to use this session to think about, I'll start to wind down now, is that we have to find a way to incorporate a serious analytical investment in affect. So love, I think, is one of the powerful ones in a whole bunch of ways. But it's trying to be comfortable with the idea that even as intellectuals, even as really heavy thinkers, there's a place in the conversation, if we make the space safe enough for productive discomfort, for gnashing of teeth. There's a space for emotion, right? I always tell people, the most serious discussions we have to have, aren't going to be these sort of genteel affairs over tea and crumpets. It's going to be tough. There might be crying and wailing. So we have to figure out how do we negotiate that space, because it seems so much bigger than what we're used to talking about when we're thinking through important social issues. But how do we see that person? How do we see them fully, in the totality of their being? I'll just end with, and for a whole bunch of you, and hopefully it'll be an appropriate way for me to sort of pass the microphone to begin, with Ralph Ellison, who really, I think, tries to get us to understand the kinds of ways in which the short-circuiting of our commitment, our rigorous commitment to affect, how affect affect the ways in which people address us, the way they interact with us. He does a wonderful job of trying to explain to us what that feels like and how and why we need to re-examine our approach to sociality in the context of all the various forms of difference that we use to police us in versus them. And I'll just do a couple minutes and then I'll pass it over to you. Where he says, I am an invisible man. This is not a spook like those that haunted Edgar Allan Poe, nor am I one of your Hollywood movie ectoplasms. I'm a man of substance, of flesh and bone, fiber and liquids. It may even be said to possess a mind. I'm invisible, understand, simply because people refuse to see me. They approach me, they do, but when they do, they show me my surroundings or themselves, or worse, figments of their own imagination. Indeed, they see effort. Anyway, except me. Now I'm not complaining necessarily or protesting. You see, sometimes it's advantageous to be in the city. But other times it gets quite taxing on the nerves. You go around getting bumped against by people with poor vision. And you start to doubt whether you do belong in the real world, whether you're a part of all the sound and the anguish, and you lash out with your fists and you curse and you swear because you want to make people recognize you. But alas, you're seldom successful. And that, my friends, is the real soul sickness. It's the spear in your side. It's the drag by the neck to the mob angry crowd. It's the grand inquisition, the embrace of the maiden, the rip in your belly with your guts just spilling out. It's the trick of the gas chamber that ends so hygienically, but it's worse because you can't die. You have to go on living. Stupid. But live you must, I guess, and you can either make passion and passionate love to your sickness or burn it out. Move on to the next conflicting phase. But what is that next conflicting phase? How often I've tried to find it. Over and over again, I've gone above to search it out. So like everyone else here, I grew up with my own sense of optimism. I believed in progress. I believed in action. But after being for your society and then against it, I assign myself no rank, no any limit. My world is one of infinite possibilities. What a phrase. Infinite possibilities. It's a good phrase. And a good view of life. And a good man shouldn't have any other. You step outside the narrow confines of what men call reality. You can step into chaos or imagination. And that too I've learned down here in my cellar. And not by deadening my own sense of perception. For I'm invisible. But I'm not blind. One of the things I want to imagine love allows us to do is to find a way to stop being blind to the folks we don't want to see. We think we don't have to see. Or we imagine to see them is almost too painful for us to interpret and understand. But to try to see differently is, I think, what the rubric, the analytic of love might allow us to push ourselves to do. Who can we see if we're trying to see through this lens of a kind of love-filled notion of sociality and interaction?
I forgot to add actor to the end of the because list of talents. So let's pick up on the point about invisibility and recognition and the lack of recognition. The line that John picked up from Du Bois, right, from The Souls of Black Folk. What does it feel like to be a problem? If we're talking about things like diversity and justice and the global liberal arts, it's hard to say global liberal arts. It's not just about numbers. And it's not just about counting, but it's about the recognition of forms of humanity that have not received due recognition. When Du Bois asks the question, what does it feel like to be a problem? He is speaking about a reality about the racialized world. You know, when I think about Du Bois, I think about successors to Du Bois. Certainly Ellison. I am not seen because I am a problem. Not seeing is a species of seeing folks as a problem. Inheritors to Ellison, inheritors to Du Bois, someone like James Baldwin, when he writes In the Fire Next Time. And he talks about the neighborhood he grew up in Harlem. And he talks about the urine-stained hallways, and the blood-soaked floors, and he asks about those people he grew up with. He says, what happened to all that beauty? What does it feel like to be a problem? What happened to all that beauty? What does it feel like to be invisible? And I leave to someone like my teacher, Cornell West, who he asked in Race Matters, what is to be done? When we think about the context of a college, a liberal arts college, we have to ask the question, what is to be done? What do you do? Not just when you feel, what does it feel like to be a problem, but what do you do when you are with folks who feel like they are a problem? What do you do in that social world where it is shaped and it problematizes whole populations? So in regard to this question about love, it is to problematize whole populations and to deem them unworthy of love. To not recognize them, to not see somebody to say to them, you are not worthy of love. And think about what that says about the rest of us. What would it feel like if an uncle or an aunt said to you, you are not worthy of my love? It would be crushing. What does it say if a whole nation says to a minority population, you are not worthy of our love? It is crushing. We have generation after generation after generation of such declarations. So again, the question, what is to be done? And so I think John's absolutely right. That question of like, what does it feel like? What do we have in our hearts when we say we are committed to something like diversity? What do you have in your heart? It's one thing to say, well, it would be great if every classroom was multicolored. But what does real difference feel like? To be troubled, as John said. To be unsettled every day. To be uncomfortable every day. Most of us do not like discomfort. Most of us do not seek discomfort. But think about this. If you say we're an institution committed to diversity and justice and the global, and if that's real, what are we saying? We're saying we're seeking discomfort in our education. Think about it. What does diversity look like when it is lived? What does it feel like when it is lived? We tend to seek our own, right? You know all these student clubs here? No? I don't know what you do when I don't see you in the class. Assuming you aggregate in clubs, right? You seek folks of common interests. But how often do you seek others? How often do you see that as an imperative to go to folks who have been told they are not worthy of love? Like those high school kids. Or Du Bois. Again, generation after generation after generation of folks of color. Think about our moment right now, this political moment. There's an election going on. Arguably one of the most acrimonious elections in modern times. And so much of the acrimony is about otherness, about particular forms of difference, or slotting folks as particularly different. The American mythology about being a nation of immigrants is being fundamentally challenged by major candidates in the party. What are we doing about this? And this is more than, say, voting for somebody else. How are we organizing ourselves? How are we teaching each other? Right? One way to think about college, which I don't think we talk enough about, is as a whole learning community. Right? So teaching and learning is not just settings like this where someone who looks like me, dressed like this, yes, dressed like this, right, teaches you in a classroom. But the reciprocity and the collaboration of learning. You know, one of my students, where's Allie? Allie, in the Internal American Studies said, Professor Kim, there's not enough gender in this syllabus. Got a little uncomfortable, like, yeah, you're right, Allie. Right? But she saw it as a responsibility on her part to call me to account. That in itself is an act of love. Who are we holding accountable? Right? Again, the deep diversity, the lived diversity. Who are we holding accountable and how are we holding each other accountable? Don't settle for slogans. Don't settle for the thinness of certain categories. And diversity sounds good, but it's hard. Justice sounds good, but it's hard. The global sounds good. But what does it mean for you? Should we have a little conversation? Keep it in reserve. Okay. Well, that's the question. Why love? Like, why are recourse to love in this context as opposed to, oh, I don't know, financial aid, or why love?
So maybe two quick answers, and I'll try to place the premium on brevity. The first is, I do think that if we're honest and if we're self-reflexive, we realize that a lot of the most important, maybe even not so important, decisions we make every single day, big and small, flow out of an answer to that question, right? So it's either some version of hopefully healthy self-love, but also thinking about the implications of your choices for the people that you care about. So I think so much, if we really begin to thematize the engine that love is, we recognize there's a lot of how we understand the way we make our way in the world that I think is a function of the decisions we make that are all about kind of how we parcel out this notion of sort of love, commitment, affect. The second thing I'll say is often we think that this is maybe a critique of myself more than of anyone else, is that the distinction between love and, say, hate is something. But actually part of what we have to recognize is that we all love so imperfectly, right? So it's not like folks are without love. Folks are loving all the time, right? Some folks might be loving themselves too much, right? In a narcissistic way, right? Some people set up their investment in love such that their love for this small category of persons here allows them to do all manner of terrible things in the name of that love, right? So it's not like it's a sort of smoking gun in some way, like it's not a silver bullet. It means let's really think deeply about who we love, how we love them, and why. And how much more expansive can the us circle get, I think is key, right? So for me, it's about saying, because often when I go on the road, I often tell people one of the things we do in our schools, we bring in students who already have this investment in making the world a better place. It sounds very trivial, but most of the students who come to my school, that's all they want to do. They don't want to make a lot of money. They want to make people's lives better. It might be big and small, but it's so inspiring every single day. At the very same time, you realize that one of the things you want to give them, I think you want to give them the tools to love as effectively as they can. And if we do really train people who are able to concretize love, make it material, translate it into policy and processes that affect people's lives, the other question becomes, can you teach people to love better? Can you teach them to love more inclusively? I want to think we can, but I think you have to be trying to both model that and to make that an explicit part of what the curriculum is in some way that's thoughtful, that's self-confident, that's theoretically driven, right? So I do feel like if we spend more time on it, we recognize we can do a much better job of getting people to love better, and that their individual lives will be the better for it. But I think the things we call social justice will also benefit from folks who are able to dispense their love in a much more open and inclusive and humane way. I think that's a really important thing that we need to take much more time trying to operationalize.
Well, I mean, let's come on that note of, two notes. If we know by the dint of the fact that we're human beings, and that we love imperfectly, as we do any of you love perfectly? We love imperfectly, and subsequently we have to try to love better. Because why? We also want to be loved better. But I think, in line with what you were just saying, John, about learning to love better, it's to understand the ways in which love operates in places that we don't recognize. So how does love operate in our teaching? How does it operate in our politics? How does it operate in our social lives? Beyond the kind of banalities of, hey, I love you. But more of the slow, deliberate, I love you. Where there is a kind of gravity to the statement. A kind of gravity to the statement. But also a kind of it's also a motivating force, right? So, to your students or to you all. The question, well, why do you do what you do? Why do you care about what you care about? Why do you care about the folks that you care about? Many of you engage in forms of public service. Why do you do that work? Now, for the crass amongst you, you say, well, I do that work because I want to have a thicker resume. But that's not really why you do it. Right? That's not really why you serve people. I mean, so when we're talking about learning to love better, part of the question, I think, is what are the forms of love that we're talking about? So, for example, in social schisms, social conflicts like racism and sexism and homophobia and so on, one of the fundamental acts of love as a powerful instrument is forgiveness. It's forgiveness. We think about how hard forgiveness is, both as a personal act, but something that would be scaled up as a social act. I mean, you don't even have to go to South Africa. You don't even have to talk about reparations and slavery in the United States. Forgiveness in regard to social law. Part of the other side of that is lifting up or cultivating capacity to take responsibility as a loving act. I did wrong. I am an agent of wrong. Let's say not even just hate, but I'm an agent of evil in the world. How do I own that in a way where you understand it as sincere and as real? These, at our current moment, this kind of language, this kind of discourse appears at the peripheries of our teaching. And I think one of the things that John and I are really trying to press are, how do you move from the periphery to the center? How do you move it from the subaltern to the surface? Which is to say, to give it a certain kind of reality and legitimacy. You want to pick up where you want? Yeah, please.
Yeah, I love this, and I want to present the opportunity for you to connect some dots for us between love and knowledge.
Great.
Because as somebody who does work on LGBTQ issues and teaches about race and racism in America, I think so many times people say, oh, well, I love gay people. And it is their, and they mean it.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that they're not completely ignorant about our lives and entirely ineffective allies because of their ignorance. My best friend's black. Of course, I get this. And so, in my work, I think about affect sometimes just being an empty placeholder for inaction. And people they don't even mean ill.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they actually believe that they like/love us.
Yeah.
And if I had to choose, so this is just like my dilemma, if I had to choose between love and knowledge, I would rather information. I would rather everybody know more about the truths about our lives and our communities.
So like, yeah. So, but what if we do if we don't make that an either or proposition, right? I mean, that's the aspiration, right? It's to love an other, and in the context of trying to fully understand and know the other. Right? And I don't mean this in a comprehensive sense, right? Like, so your friends say, like, oh, I love gay people, right? Or I love the Asians. What is it to love? I mean, part of it's what's missing in that knowledge gap is the lack of reciprocity. Right? Like, what do you actually know of what I suffered? What do you actually know of the history? What do you actually know, right? And to know there is an act of love, right? Because if you're extending yourself, you're breaking, you're disrupting where you are. I mean, you know, Socrates, when he talks about know thyself. To know thyself also means to get to a point where you can love yourself. And to know the world is also to understand what you love and what you don't love. Right? I mean, the part of the banality to think about the language of love is that it seems so thin and slippery and widespread. We are particular about how we love. Right? But love requires another. The other may be yourself, maybe another person. Love requires an other, an object, someone to receive that love and to give back. You want to come?
It was a great question. I thought you did a nice job of just trying to, because I also want to imagine it doesn't have to be either or, but I think if I had to choose, I would also take knowledge. But with the assumption being that to really know, right, to really understand, is to actually open yourself up to the possibility of the stuff I'm using love as a placeholder for, right? Which is engagement, empathy, commitment. You know, ultimately, I do think part of what, for me, is really difficult in all this is I recognize that, you know, when we talk about commitment, especially in the context of folks who have different kind of ideological positions, different everyday lifestyles, different history, like there's so much to trip us up. And what I want to imagine is it becomes most difficult, that's why I think the knowledge thing is important, because we tend to be having these exchanges with strangers, effectively. People we don't know. Right? We always want to have a new conversation on something, right? And often we want to talk to people we don't know anything about, we don't care anything about. And so I always tell people what happens, and this maybe is obvious and goes without saying, is once that interlocutor says something that we don't like, which inevitably they will, right, because they don't know us, then we can just write them off, right? Why? We have no investment in it. I don't know you. I don't care about you. You might work in the office with me, but we never go home and never have you over for dinner. We don't know one another that way. So I can fire you, right? You're fired. Right? I vote you off the island. This fantasy that we can just talk and not actually be using that as a means to building community. And everything has to be substantive. It means having to know the other. It means really being invested in that. Might still be frustrating, might still be difficult. There'll still be issues you don't agree on, but you're less likely to just cut and run at the merest sign, a hint of a discrepant view or a different way of being in the world. And so I want to imagine that our job is to figure out how to get people committed to the idea of getting to know one another, period. And to say that we don't have the luxury of sending people to another planet, at least not yet, right? Maybe at some point it must give us that possibility too. But for now, we're stuck with one another. And so we can run to our separate corners and sulk and sort of, do what we do now, which is have debate under the guise of dialogue, right? So I'm going to try to win the argument, make sure, I get the best singer in, as opposed to saying, how do I use communication to actually form a sociality that's functional, that allows us to engage in the projects we want to engage. So I think you're right. I think you're right to say it has to be about knowing. I want to imagine that one of the reasons why I want to know what my son is doing, what my daughter is doing, because of the love for them, right? Now, again, sometimes it's difficult, right? So, you often have to then figure out, is there a way, and you have a vested interest in continuing to get to know someone you love who's doing something you don't want them to do, you don't believe is right. But if you have a fighting chance of at least beginning to get past your own inhibitions and short-sightedness, if you already have some sort of sense of who they are, some track record of relationship with them, and a knowledge that you can build on. And I would think build into a whole bunch of different kinds of possibilities, but I would imagine they do go together. I was more long-winded than I was hoping.
Well, I just want to, I'll get to this in a second. Just a quick note about one of the things about love in practice in the social form is that it requires something like courage. The willingness to take certain kinds of risks, the willingness to let yourself be vulnerable to somebody even if you don't really know them. And one of the impoverishments of so much language around community is, well, what do we do together? Right? Not how are we together, but what do we do together? It's this utility, this kind of instrumentalization. As opposed to, well, what are we building together? What are we working on together? Not just for the sake of working on it, but to achieve some end that deepens our humanity. What's the public good? What's the social good that we're trying to advance? It doesn't exist yet because we haven't worked together in a way that's deep and enabling. If we're doing that work together, it is a statement about caring about another in a way that is different than we are when we're on our own.
So I don't mean this as a pushback question, but I'm wondering about whether there are different registers of love that you're talking about. I'm thinking about the difference between loving somebody that you identify some kind of sameness with versus, earlier in particular, John, we're talking about the love that needs to happen between groups of people who, frankly, one group sees themselves as more equal than perhaps another group. And I'm wondering about whether identification, the kind of identification that's required for the love that you've been talking about mostly, which I think of it's more like the kind of love that would happen between people who see themselves as similar. Whether, in fact, in these other groups of people where there's division and difference and people seeing themselves as not on the same page, not in the same community, whether in fact it's a rather a radical acceptance of alterity that's called for, right? An acceptance you are more fundamentally different from me than I've been willing to allow myself to accept. I'm thinking in particular, and I don't know if the reference will be familiar, but I've been thinking a lot about Saidiya Hartman's work on empathic identification and where it goes wrong. She, argues that that white folks looking at the slave on the auction block might identify with that slave and in that way, be concerned with his cause, but that in so doing, they really fail to see that other person. They're identifying with their own feelings about themselves and their own feelings of being maybe a good person or having suffered. So how do we imagine, what is the ground level on which love can be built between groups of people who do not see themselves as having anything in common? Isn't it actually an acknowledgement of fundamental difference of some kind?
So I'm trying to be, that's a great question, Liz. I'm going to be, for better or worse, I think, sort of maybe conventionally anthropological.
Awesome.
So I do think part of what we're trying to do is keep a version of a productive tension in place between recognizing differences and taking them seriously, but also understanding that we have a species being that actually connects us as well. Right? So I think it's not being extremist in some ways on either end, but also recognize there are moments when to get people to see differences they want to invisibilize is important, but also not to let them so reify and fetishize a form of difference that they imagine it means we don't have a common humanity. And so part of what I feel like is we have all these instances, and I wrote, it's going to sound like maybe a trivial example, but I thought it was very powerful at the time, in the Chronicle of Higher Education, a piece about what I think is often a difference between faculty who I think are fantastic, who I care about, in different places, who you see them doing this tabulation, right, in their heads kind of. And if it's a student who does something, maybe not quite perfect, the students sometimes do, right? Maybe really unperfect. they can either, especially if they feel like the student is kind of like them, they go off the book, they talk to him, take him, her, them aside and say, hey, this is what I want you to do. Whereas another student, ostensibly more different, this is what the book says, this is the policy, right? And so, and I see that from folks who are wonderful people, actually. You probably don't even recognize this double standard that they're deploying. And so, and part of what I try to argue in that piece is, we should be consistent and recognize that our job is to actually treat all of our students in the way we treat the student we imagine is just like us, like we imagine ourselves to have been when we were their age. And I think it's being able to do that maybe we have to be careful about sort of what the limitations of empathy are, and I get that. But I also feel like, for me, the bigger issue is that people are very good at being committed to the folks they've already assumed and accepted as them. Now they can find other curious, weird ways to open up their circle. I would argue the larger we can make the circumference of that circle of us, the more effective we all are. And I think the more just we can be. I'm watching right now, how many of you all watch television? Maybe not big television. I don't think undergraduates watch television.
No, that's what
That's wild. Well, yeah, I'll count it.
It's a square box.
Television is a metaphor. I tell you it's a metaphor. I don't think it's literally. It's like film. No one's shooting on film anymore. It's a metaphor. It's digital video. But I'm watching Underground now. I don't know if folks are watching on WGN. It's on. And anybody seen it? Anybody? And Underground is, another story about the Underground Railroad, about and there's something about what's powerful to me about that project. I don't know if they'll be able to pull it off. I'm only like 4 or 5 episodes in. Is that they're clearly trying to make this a story not just about 19th century America, but about contemporary American racial politics. And they're doing it in a way that isn't heavy-handed. I think it's very subtle. It's not just the music of Kanye West and others, right? But it's a way of saying, like, we need to deal with this history because it is with us right now. And I think to be able to get us as a community to see that we're all implicated in the past that have created us, which doesn't mean some of us, wear white hats all the time and some of us wear black hats all the time. I mean, we're all kind of gummed up in the works of this machine. We got to figure out how we got here, what we learned from where we've been, and what we can use to allow us to build the kind of a world we imagine is good for all of us, that really is inclusive, and that doesn't allow some forms of specificity to masquerade as sort of universal and normative. But that work, I think, is the work that it takes us right here and now saying, well, if we're talking about love, maybe what we're really trying to get at is knowledge that gets people to at least understand and recognize the humanity of the other. And if love is a shorthand way of talking about that, I'll take it. Because I do feel like at the end of the day, what I want to imagine is it's by itself, it does nothing. But as an agent, as a catalyst for a certain set of actions in the world, even at a place like Connecticut College, right? If you're thinking self-consciously about what the loving you does every day, that actually allows yourself to inform your decisions in a more self-conscious way, I think we'll probably all benefit in some way. So just getting people to think about it and thematize it is good. But ultimately, I do think you're right to say, empathy isn't enough. It's not simply about identifying on your own terms in ways that make you feel better. It's about actually trying to figure out ways to critique yourself of that, even as you form relationships with folks who ostensibly you should care about because they're also here and human and occupying the same world you're occupying.
I'm going to pick up on the note of the activity and the agency and the imagination. Right, because like what you're describing is, well, I may confront or happen to find myself confronted with someone who's different. Right? And what do I do with that? As if these kinds of coincidences are always passive. Right? They could be passively aggressive, for example, like, oh, you're different. Stay there. But what happens when it's not passive? When you say, because what you're describing then is an enactment of a kind of moral imagination. How do I imagine myself differently? Because again, that sense of discomfort is a barometer. But why do I feel uncomfortable? What is unsettling about being with you? Well, not you, but you, right? With you. Like, what is unsettling about that? It's telling me something, it's knowledge. Right? And it's not just like I happen to find myself in the situation, but what do I proactively do about it? Our good friend George Lipsitz, the great historian, likes making this distinction between founding and forging. Right? You're not trying to found something, but you're trying to forge something together. Right? Making community, being different with others and yourself is an activity. Right? It's an enactment of one's agency. Right? So what is it that we're trying to forge together that we would not otherwise have if we were independent of each other? What is it to forge something with somebody that is so radically different from me? That they make me so radically uncomfortable. I might happen to find something in them. Like, oh, you like tennis? I like tennis. Right? As opposed to, well, what are we going to make together? What are we going to forge together that's different? Talk about vulnerability. How's that forging an indication that I'm going to be different? That I'm going to change. I'm going to change something about my life. I'm going to change something about our collective lives. Extend that circle of we that John was talking about. It's not a habit to extend your arms out. To extend our circles of identification. You are with me. Think about that act of courage. But it's also not just courage, right? It's also hope. Hope is a precondition here. Because one can be cynical about that. Like, oh, you are different. Predetermined judgment of dismissal. As opposed to, wow, you're different, so what's going to happen to you? A certain kind of curiosity, an intellectual curiosity, a certain kind of political curiosity, a social curiosity that might eventuate into something like a new reality. And that's part of the hope. Questions?
Well, not necessarily questions, but more like, I don't know, more just like a statement. Well, I think a question too. You know, a lot of the themes that you guys have been speaking on have been connecting with me. I would say, like, coming from, you know, my like upbringing of like a culture of distrust was very pervasive, and you know, where I grew up. Moving to a high school, a Quaker high school, where I got to see firsthand a community that was a homogeneous community. They all stood for the same values, and you know, I got a glimpse of like what the kind of love you guys are describing. That, you know, holding each other accountable, and you know, being there for one another, and I don't know, having that like just like, you know, having that love for like just not just the people sitting next to you, but people like everyone around you and stuff like that. And while that was like, it was very, I mean, it's what I needed at the moment. It really was, and it like burst my heart open. And I was able to, you know, try to like, you know, love everyone, you know, around me and stuff like that. But it also left me with the idea that I could just, okay, now the whole world does not operate on the same level as like, or like the same agreement as a community like that. You know, saying that we are all Quaker, we all stand for these things. So I guess what happened to me, what happened to me was like I came into another community, a more diverse community, people coming from very different backgrounds, going towards different goals, and you know, people who saw like my type of love. The example I had, a lot of people saw it as like foolhardy, but you know, I was attempting to let like a lot of people in, and a lot of people saw it as foolhardy. A lot of people, you know, they didn't even recognize it, and other people like accepted it. But what it left me with was a sense of distrust, a feeling of distrust, because I was, I don't know, it's a very particular feeling.
Well, it's alienating, right?
Yeah, going out and try bringing all this like love, or like my example of love, or what I thought it was, and like, you know, part of it was naiveness, and like, you know, not understanding the levels at which people can like be diverse, like deep diverse that I've not been in contact with before. But also I don't know, it's very, yeah, as I said, it's alienating, breaks you down. And, you know, I'm currently just like trying to find a way forward with that, trying to learn as much as I can about like this new environment, even direct philosophy concerns. And yeah, so
Yeah.
wrap up.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, what's
What do you do?
a way forward?
Yeah. Well, I mean, one thing is to actually be a bit more forgiving, not just of yourself, but of others. Because I think one of the fundamental challenges of, let's call it public love or social love, is that it's inevitably going to be disappointing. People are not going to live up to your hopes. People are not going to live up to your promise. Again, you're forging. If they did immediately, it would be more like the finding. Like, oh, wow, you accepted me immediately. You know, this kind of public love and social love that we're talking about is enormously challenging, and it's work, and it's often not immediate. And actually, it's often an indication of a certain kind of immaturity if we think that love is always immediate. Put it another way, you have to work at it. Right? And so to build up that toleration and that kind of durability, that's going to take time, patience, a certain kind of wisdom, knowing that the folks that you love are going to not just love you back imperfectly, but not going to love you back at all. You know, I use the term reciprocity a lot. Right? What's that exchange like between myself and somebody else? Am I expecting the same kind of love back that I give? Probably not. You know, I'm the father of teenage boys. I know what that's like. I love them deeply. I don't always get the same love back. Right? But I'm not going to stop loving them. Right? Or put it another way, if I said, well, I'm only going to love you if you love me back, that's a highly, highly conditioned form of love. My people don't roll on that.
A lot of times you have the question of difference. In your title you have the word power. I'm somehow reserved when we talk about differences because somebody always defines you as different. You know, I don't wake up in the morning saying I'm Natalie, I'm black, I speak French, I'm different. I just wake up in the morning. Why am I bring this up? Because I think there's a certain assumption with difference. I think if we don't bring up power in relation to differences and who gets to say you are different, I don't think people wake up in the morning thinking they are different. They are made to feel a certain way by the external forces of this world. So if we don't question power and we just talk about love as some kind of feeling, in French we only have one word for love, is aimer. And when I moved to the US, you had this sentence, I love you, but I don't like you. It took me a little while to figure it out. It's like, but then I understood because that kind of love, maybe it's agape love. I think we can choose to like something. In America they like everything. You like coffee, you like your boyfriend, you like watching TV. It's weird. But then, what about love when we're talking about a certain kind of duty in relation to other human beings, and that is agape love. And it's a political act. It's a commitment. It's an action word. It's not necessarily a feeling. And could we reverse the discourse about differences in relation to power? It's just very difficult for me to say you are different because you are already putting that person in the box. So you're black, you're gay. I don't think necessarily that those people, they wake up in the morning, they're human beings, but then they have to face adversity. And then the language of difference or othering, you don't other yourself. The power structure other you. And the power structure is sometimes, most of the time, white, heteropatriarchal, and you know all the rest. So how do we bring that into this conversation so that people don't leave the room thinking that they have to do so much work on themselves, whereas some people who are supposed to be doing the work are not working. And what do you do with power when people who are actually oppressing you tell you that they love you, but then they're oppressing you because you also have that language at the same time?
I think you just did it. I think it is important, as you say, in some ways it's part of what I would want this sort of homage to Ralph Ellison to remind us is that, all of the decisions that we make are political decisions. Right? We always say, one of the things everyone is fond of saying now, not just anthropologists, even not just social scientists, is that things like race are a social construction. And one of the things that we often don't do after that is ask ourselves, what was it constructed to do? What was it constructed to do? It had and it has a function. And I think if you ask that question, I think one of the things you realize is its fundamental objective was to find a way to justify a certain kind of systematic global othering, right? Maybe a function of fear, terror, acquisitive and greedy interest in others' territory, property, but at its heart, what race is supposed to do was give us scientific, vernacular, cultural, political backing for a certain investment in making the other so different that it's irreconcilable, right? And I think there's a way in which our job is to remember that part of what we need to be doing, even in and through the seemingly ethereal language of love, is to always concretize this stuff. And bless you. And to think about all the things these terms, no matter what the terms are, allow us to see and that they invisibilize. And so to get to open our eyes to the fact that actually love takes work, as you said, and you can do a lot of negative things under its auspices anyway, right? So I think you've already laid that out. And part of what it means is we're not off the hook simply by saying the word and imagining we feel good about it. But it's like, how do you take that commitment and institutionalize it? What does that look like? Right? And I think that's kind of where the rubber hits the road in a lot of ways.
Well, I guess I would push it even further, right? It's not even just to institutionalize it, but so if we take the phrase social construction, think about the whole phrase, it's a social construction of reality, right? So power differentiates, as you said, right? And that differentiation has gravity, it has existential weight, right? It is our reality. So the frame of social construction is to give us some critical distance from that. But critical distance often isn't enough, right? I mean, part of our, John and I and Liz and some others, drawn on this language of love is we're looking for other sources too, right? We don't want to abandon a certain kind of critical knowledge, critical sensibility at all, right? I mean, absolutely, power differentiates, and it often differentiates unequally, right? And there's a distribution of social capital, there's a distribution of worth, right? I mean, race is what? It's about hierarchy. Politics is what? It's about hierarchy, and it's about the enactment of power. I mean, we began the hour by asking about, quoting Du Bois, what does it feel like to be a problem? That's to ask about a certain kind of socially constructed humanity. What does it feel like to be a problem, and what are you going to do about it? And what can one do about it? It is an act of self-love, I would argue, right? To not just merely accept the differences of power and heart, but to resist. The theme of the hour, speaking truth to power with love, is a statement about resistance. Not accepting the world as given, but questioning the world in a way where it is infused with a form of humanity, recognizing forms of humanity that otherwise unrecognized.
First of all, thank you for being here. And I guess I've been thinking about Elijah Anderson's Code of the Street. And I'm from Germantown, so I've seen these dynamics play out. And I guess I'm wondering, what do you think about these everyday acts of resistance and radical love and changing our institutions and society at large? In moments with strangers who you probably won't have the opportunity to get to know and have that established relationship. Like, how do we move through spaces with your name going from, George School to a different kind of neighborhood and whatever, like, how does that play out? And how can we be active agents in that kind of reciprocal relationship with those who we won't ever know?
That's a great question. One of the ways in which I think my students try to frame that is by talking about the extent to which, you can read all the critical race theory you can, you can really take seriously all the conceptual frameworks you get in a classroom, in a textbook, in all these texts. But often when you're walking down the street at night and you see someone and all of the sort of almost back of the neck, really primal concerns and fears that were, in some ways, you've been acculturated to believe long before you got to college, right? I mean, part of what's so powerful about your question is there's a lot that we imagine we can do here that will leave you in that moment, right? When fear hits, right, and you're trying, after a while you feel guilty about it, you feel bad, you wish you could hold on that particular theoretical framework, maybe, right? But in the moment, often you realize part of what you're trying to do is routinize your commitment to this stuff so that you can do it unthinking. Right? That it isn't something you've kind of learned and it's sort of on top of in this way that doesn't feel integrated and embedded on top of who and what you are in some fundamental way. So I think it means actually trying every single day to operationalize this commitment in taking these ideas and just seeing what the translation means and looks like in practice. And it just means not beating up on yourself when you don't live up to your highest ideals in every moment. But I think it also means it's not something you succeed at doing one time and then for the rest of your life you're an anti-racist, anti-sexist, non-homophobic actor in the world and never. I mean you're constantly working at it. Exactly. You're constantly working at it. And pushing yourself to be strong. And I think that's the key is to recognize that no matter nothing is gonna inoculate us from ourselves. What it means to be human is to always be susceptible to all that stuff, right? One of the figure that I always bring up is Leo Felton, and David knows him. I talk about him almost all the time, every time we come together, because he's someone who got famous in 1999 for getting arrested in a Dunkin' Donuts in Boston, so not too far from here, for trying to pass off fake bills. But that wasn't why the story became known to me. We also found out that he was passing off these fake bills as part of a plot of a neo-Nazi skinhead organization to fund some really horrible acts they wanted to do in and around the Boston area, blowing up Jewish monuments, all this kind of stuff. And that was a big story, right? I mean, they found a way to foil, to stop them from doing this horrible work. But what became really fascinating is when the journalists went in and spoke to Leo Felton about what he was doing and why, they realized he was just passive for a while in this community. Right? He was, he pretended he was sort of, a dark-skinned Southern Italian. And he says he did that not because he was doing some expose on the neo-Nazis from New York or anything like that. Because he said he wasn't a racial materialist. He knew race wasn't about biology, it's a social construction. Right? His compatriots, however, didn't understand that. So he had to at least pretend to them he was something that he wasn't. Now, again, part of what I think for me it reminds us of is, even this notion of social construction. You can buy that, you can get it, you can really believe it. He can philosophize, quoting all the folks I quote and anthropological quote, to give him the philosophical and theoretical grounding for the claim that race is a biological real, and still use it to do some incredibly horrible things in the world, even knowing that it's not linked to any biological, genetic, ontological reality. That's the kind of species we are. So it means we have to be constantly working with ourselves and thinking critically about the decisions we're making. And so ultimately, again, it means sometimes, you'll read a book like Elijah Anderson's Code of the Streets, you'll think there's a lot in there that's useful, not all of it necessarily. Some of it you critique, right? I mean, anytime someone opens their mouth, you all know that here, they're making an argument. Anytime they open their mouth, even to say, it's almost 4 o'clock, right? They're making an argument. Sometimes it's more or less explicit, but they're making an argument. And so your job is to figure out, okay, what are they arguing? Or what evidence are they making their case? And what do I think about the kind of way they're compelling me to think about my place in the world? You got to do that. If you don't do that, you will be a sucker. We all will, right? But part of the reason why culture is so amazing is when it's at its most powerful, we don't see it. It's like the air we breathe. We use it to see. So then how do you do that? How do you do analysis of this cultural landscape from within the belly of that beast? How do you do that work? I think it means you have to, at every turn, be constantly thinking about the decisions you're making in a way that, again, half the time you have to just, you get up in the morning, you have to do your work, you have to think about, what the day is going to be. You don't have the time and luxury unless, not even anymore now, I was going to say, unless you're in college, you have 4 years, you just luxuriate in learning, but even then you all are doing so much outside of class. But I think the key is to know it takes work to do this. It doesn't come natural. It's like manna from on high. Like you have to do the work, and it's going to be hard work, and that's okay. That's okay because ultimately you're doing it for yourself as much as for anyone else and for the betterment, I think, of society. But it doesn't mean there's no one theoretical model, no one sort of analytic that gives us all the protection we need against the sort of the lower versions of ourselves.
I'll just pick up one quick note on this, right? About fear and difference and power. Because what we're often experiencing, feeling, is not just fear, but danger. And so we need to think and to understand, to know ourselves, well, what do we consider to be dangerous? Why do we find certain folks dangerous? Danger and strangeness. What is it to love the stranger? What is it to love in the context of the strange, where it is not comfortable, normal, accepted to love the stranger? Again, it requires this deep, John was talking about, this deep self-knowledge, but also cultivation of certain kinds of habits. How do we habitually respond to folks that we consider to be dangerous? And when we take that second order reflection and ask, well, why do we consider them to be dangerous in the first place? And what are we going to do about it? Again, not just what does it feel like to be a problem, but what does it feel like to be with those who feel like they're a problem? That's a question about danger. Yeah.
So my comments actually extend from Natalie's a bit, in the sense that I'm interested in how is it that you're talking about love. We've been talking about unconditional love in my classes in the context of healing. And so Natalie raised the issue of agape, right? A kind of love, right? It can be a filial love.
Or moral love.
Right? A moral love that has kind of social element. I'm interested in thinking about, I like the way you started to unpack love as praxis, right? And it's a set of practices, it's action over time. But also, how is it that love can be in an ontological position that's arrived at, right? And I'm interested in, you may have, because I came in late, you may have unpacked this at the start. We think about the sacred dimension of love, right? That love is something that is also transcendent, especially if we think of it in context of speaking truth to power, right? This theological context. So could you say a little bit more about maybe the sacred dimension of love, and love as an ontological dimension?
Okay, maybe I would go at it this way. I'm not sure I would go necessarily, immediately to the sacred. But again, this kind of aspirational quality of this love. Meaning, who are we not realizing? What kinds of selves are we not realizing when we don't love? Right? If again, hate, distaste, danger is our first motive, fear. Right? Or even if we find ourselves in a certain hierarchy, like to be oppressed. I mean, the ontology question is, again, this like, what are we trying to realize in ourselves? Right? And there is this kind of disproportionate economy, affective economy. Like if I'm on the bottom of a hierarchy, well, why am I loving you more than you love me back? Right? What is calling me to speak truth to power with love, to disrupt and to dissent when the prevailing evidence says go on? Much of what John and I have been trying to do, along with some other folks, in this group we call this Love-Driven Politics Collective. It's really to fight a sentiment and temperament of cynicism, right? That love is specious, right? It's frivolous. Someone used the word, Jermaine, right? It's foolish, it's folly. We're prone to be misrecognized, if not under-recognized. But again, risk. To love well is to risk. To love politically is to perform certain kinds of risks. Right? Just as a strategy, even just as a kind of first, salvo in a political engagement to say, well, I'm going to love you first. Exactly. as opposed to I'm going to pummel you first and then you're going to love me. Right? That's it's a tremendously courageous statement, and it is a different, to use a logical language, it is a different way of being in the world. Part of what we're trying to argue for is to insist that there are different ways to be in the world. You don't have to be prone to the cynicism of prevailing politics. You don't have to accede to existing hierarchies. You can actually disrupt them. And it won't be easy, you'll be disappointed. But again, the need for patience here is super important. All right.
So it seems to me from our discussion that we should not love because of, but love to. For example, we should not love because of alignment or likeness, but love to understand. What do you guys think of that? Have you agree or disagree?
I think it's a very, I think it's a very powerful form of formulation, right? Ask yourself, like, what does love allow you to do, you know? And to be. I like it.
Well, and it's a direct challenge to the kind of instrumentalization we were talking about earlier. Well, I'm going to love you if I get something back. I'm going to love you if you're going to make me suffer. I'm going to love you if you find me deserving. I love you especially more if you find me deserving, right? To love because you want material gains as opposed to valuing and respecting the innate goodness of love is a problem. Right? I think that's what you're talking about. Right?
Although even the instrumentalists tell us now, you know, so I have a colleague at the Ward School, Adam Grant, who was that part of what I feel like I always want to be in any room, and sadly sometimes it's very easy to do, now all the time increasingly hopefully becomes more and more difficult, is I always want to be the most generous person in the room. And part of Adam Grant's argument is, actually generosity is how you get what you want. It's counterintuitive. So kind of like the good book, the right, better to give to receive, is actually better, it's more profitable to give and give and give and give. Especially if you just want to receive. So the whole point really is, even if you're talking in utilitarian terms, it's still better to be generous than not. Right? So it's almost like there's no reason not to. Right? Because even if ultimately it's still this sort of self-interested idea that this is the way I get what I want, the way you do it is to give, or is to be generous, try to be generous. And so, I mean, I think there's a way in which even that model will say, how can I be more generous? So people who disagree with me, people who, you know, treat me unfairly, who talk about me, who think that me being generous either means I'm weak or don't understand my commitment. You know, to be as generous as you can be, to model that, this can be a very powerful thing too. It can also get you what you want to.
Let's do two more, maybe? Yeah, so
I was thinking, kind of off the Jen's question for a while, early on about this question about knowledge and the role of knowledge. It makes me think that the way that you've been talking about this, and I've been trying to kind of put it into a kind of whole picture for myself, is that there's the level, so there's the epistemological, how we know the world around us, which can include love, that can include love. But then there's the ontological, which is the being in the world, which also includes love. And I think that there's that other level that we're starting to get at the political. And I mean the political in terms of the way we act in the world. Kind of politics is a much broader, everyday politics. So that love, in the way that you're talking about it, infuses all of these kind of realms from the epistemological through the ontological and ending with political. And then it needs to cycle through these in order for there to be that kind of full, because you can sit and you can think about something, right? Part of the world is not to think about it, but anyway, right? So you and nothing happens from that, or you become an armchair philosopher. So, and I feel like that I hear that in what you're all talking about, and what a lot of folks in the audience are talking about. I'm not sure it's a question as much as
yeah, no, I think we've been kind of stumbling toward this aspiration of how do you make this real. Right, again, we're talking about a certain kind of social construction of reality. How do you make a different reality real? Right? It is political, it is ontological, it is emotional, right? It is epistemological. We may know it in our hearts, but we know it in reality. One of the things that we've been talking about in this Love Driven Politics Collective is the aspiration to be tough-minded and tender-hearted. Not to give up on critical thinking, not to abandon it, and if anything, to double down on that, but also to have profound tenderness that sits behind it, right? Not just to get over on people, but actually love.
I mean, I would just make the distinction, which I always do, between being critical and being judgmental. You can be critical, be very careful and thoughtful, without being dismissive of the fact that other people aren't there with you. That difference is powerful.
You want our last one, please?
Yeah. So I want to go back a little bit with the power, sort of dynamic. So I have like quite a array of questions.
Maybe we'll just ask you to say one.
Okay, but they kind of fit together, so I'll just ask and then just so we did talk about like sharing love, and then so when you mentioned about forging love with other people, but then I was asking a question how can we form or forge love with other people when we have different agendas? So it's kind of difficult for one person to love more, and to love one person more, and then the other person is not dedicated to loving another. And then for who is suffering from sharing so much love, and then for who is it going to be between them? And then also the ones who build the patience and the durability. Why does one have to exercise that love more than the other? So it's just that struggle. And then and then also once you face that sort of specific kindness, doesn't that seem for love? I think it's so different. If you're hurt and then you say you come to the point where you think foolish love, then doesn't that change it? And then it's just it's crazy because then the masses of people don't really share that love, and then you feel disappointed and
Very good.
That's good. I mean, I guess all I'll say very briefly is just to riff off of something you said earlier. I think it is fundamentally about making yourself comfortable. Right? And so the question is, can more and more of us be willing to be mutually vulnerable in a way that actually, again, some of it can very decidedly taint us, right? And make us unwilling to love again. And that stuff is real. But I think our job is, I think it's to recognize that even though we might feel like we're leaving ourselves open to being hurt, to being abused, which is possible, there are other ways, and this is part of how to love more effectively, to try to protect yourself from those abuses. Right? Let's think about and theorize what those supports would be to make sure that it's vulnerability within reason, it doesn't lead to trauma, right? That allows people to think about themselves being vulnerable without really opening themselves up to the kinds of potential harrowing experiences that we do know we don't want people to be susceptible to for no good reason. So I think the key is to know loving well also means figuring out what kind of protection, right? What kind of prophylaxis you need in a world that isn't full of as much love. That can be a very dangerous process.
And I'll be very quick to riff on something John said earlier. Love in these kinds of ways is to make an argument. Right? It's to argue with the world as it is. And to argue with the world, you don't win first one out, right? You got to keep making that argument. Everyone, please thank John Jackson.